They told you death is the end, a closing door, a descent into silence, but you've always felt otherwise, haven't you? Somewhere deep beneath the noise of the world, beneath the conditioning, beneath the linear thinking and the gravitational pull of rationality, there has always been a whisper, a knowing, not born of intellect but of memory. The memory of something older than time, more intimate than breath, and more enduring than bone. You are not the first to question the illusion, nor the last to hear the silent echo that calls out just before sleep, just before waking, just before forgetting. An echo that asks not what you believe, but what you remember. And now something stirs again, not from outside you, but from within. A fragment reactivating, a code aligning, as if some part of you long buried under centuries of forgetting is rising again to the surface. Not as theory or metaphor, but as a living pulse. A return to what the ancient ones knew and what the system desperately hoped you'd never find. This is the beginning, not of a story, but of an unraveling, a decoding of the veil itself. 1,200 years ago, a manuscript was scribed not for scholars, not for priests, not for institutions, but for the soul. For the precise moment the body falls away and the luminous traveler begins the first of 49 crossings. These crossings were never symbolic. They were vibrational corridors, layers of mind, dimensions of thought and light that bend around the core of self like petals of fire and silence, waiting to be walked with full awareness or stumbled through in the fog of fear. This manuscript, long hidden, was encoded in geometric resonance, in syllables that vibrated the ether, in gold ash ink laid upon black bark vellum and sealed within soundless prayer. And it carried no doctrine, no rules, only a map, one that could not be read with the eyes but with the frequency of remembrance. This map has surfaced again, not by accident, not by discovery, but by alignment. For those with eyes reawakening, for those whose timelines are converging upon the gate of return, for those who know without knowing how they know. You have felt it, the moments when time folds in on itself, when the world feels thinner, when you see the number 7 or 49 in strange places, when dreams carry the scent of ancient places you've never visited but deeply recognize. You have felt the quickening, you have heard the whisper, and now you are being called, not to follow, but to remember. Because you have walked this path before and you are not reading these words, you are retrieving them. The system, the machine, the construct of mind and modernity. It wants you to believe you are matter, nothing more than flesh animated by electrical impulse and chemical sequence. But the manuscript reveals a deeper truth. You are a waveform, a nested field, a self-reflecting geometry of intention and awareness traveling through layers of illusion that only look like solidity because you were taught to forget how to see. Death is not departure, it is transference, it is initiation, it is the lifting of the first veil. And the first of the 49 days begins not after death, but the moment the soul detaches its awareness from the body's electromagnetic lattice and returns to its own rhythm. That rhythm is not time, it is frequency, and each of the 49 layers is not a place but a tone, not a destination but a state, not a judgment but a mirror. In the first 7 days you face the emotional bindings, the sorrow, the fear, the longing, the shame. If unprepared, you identify with them, become entangled again, reincarnate by compulsion. If awake, you pass through them like wind through silk. In the second 7 days, mental projections arise, symbols, entities, illusions of paradise or torment, forms woven by your own unresolved subconscious. Again, if you forget, you bind. If you remember, you walk through. This continues layer after layer, 7 cycles of 7. Until by the 49th frequency, only one thing remains, the pure awareness beyond form, and it is there, and only there, that liberation becomes possible. But this cannot be taught in books. It cannot be spoken in classrooms. It must be activated. And that is what the manuscript was made for, not to teach, but to unlock. You are not here to fear death. You are here to remember how to walk through it with your eyes open, your spirit steady, your vibration in alignment with the song that cannot be heard, only felt. They hid this from you, not because it is dangerous, but because you are. You were never meant to survive blindly. You were born to remember. You are not here to be good or obedient or safe. You are here to be sovereign. You are not a student of systems. You are a child of light learning to become light again. And these words, this knowing, this frequency is your first step back into the mystery. The doorway was never forbidden to keep you out. It was hidden so you would choose to find it. And now, you have. They taught you that what is real must be measurable, that truth must be weighed, quantified, observed through lenses crafted by minds that deny the very essence of soul. And in doing so, they wove a perfect illusion, not one of shadows, but of certainty, of structure, of lines and borders drawn so precisely you forgot they were never real, only imagined into being by generations who themselves forgot. You were born into a system that whispered from the first breath, obey the visible, reject the invisible, revere logic, dismiss intuition, and above all, never look too closely at the edges of the world. Because there, just beyond the reach of consensus, lies the place they feared you would remember. The illusion is not merely societal, it is vibrational, it is energetic. It is the finely tuned resonance of suppression, a frequency designed to lull the soul into forgetting its source and destiny. They call it science, but strip it of its sacredness. They call it education, but use it to program limitation. They call it progress, but it leads further into distraction, disconnection, decay. The body is not a machine. The mind is not the master. The world is not a fixed reality. But to keep the game intact, they had to make you believe in three anchors. That matter is all that exists, that time is linear, and that consciousness is born of brain activity rather than being the eternal witness inhabiting the brain for a brief experience of density. This is the cage, elegant, logical, empirical, but still a cage. Think of your childhood, the images you were fed, the answers you were given before you even asked the questions. The laughter you made as a child when you saw spirits in corners or felt emotions from strangers and were told, it's just your imagination. But what is imagination if not the last remnant of vision before it is erased? They made you forget on purpose. Because a being who remembers cannot be controlled, and control is the axis of the system, not law, not justice, not truth, only control. They made you fear death so you would cling to life at any cost. They made you fear the unknown so you would never journey inward. They made you fear stillness so you would never hear the ancient voice that only speaks in silence. This is not paranoia. This is pattern. If you step back far enough, you see it. The sameness in all cultures, all eras. Suppress the feminine, suppress the mystical, suppress the inner. Replace vision with doctrine. Replace knowing with belief. Replace soul with ideology. But the soul never forgets. It waits, patiently, until the cracks appear. Until one day you see the same number 3 times in 1 hour and something stirs. Until you dream of a place you've never been and it feels more like home than the house you grew up in. Until grief tears something open and you feel a presence not seen but unmistakably real. These are not anomalies. These are not glitches. These are the soul knocking on the glass of the illusion, reminding you, this is not all there is. You are trained to dismiss these signs, told to return to the real world. But ask yourself, who decided what real means? Was it your soul? Or was it a system built to keep you asleep? Look at how the world reacts to the mystic, the intuitive, the awakened, with ridicule, suspicion, dismissal. Look how the media treats the sacred. It mocks, dilutes, sensationalizes, or ignores. Look how language itself has been distorted. Magic becomes trickery. Spirit becomes superstition. Death becomes horror. These are not linguistic accidents. They are vibrational implants designed to guide your frequency away from remembrance and into compliance. But something always resists, a spark in the dark, a refusal to forget. That resistance is why you're here now, reading this, feeling something rise, something ancient, something true, because you were never fully asleep, only pretending to survive, but now survival is no longer enough. You were not born to survive, you were born to awaken, to break the dream from within it, to turn inward and burn away the false light until only the eternal flame remains. And in that flame, you will see what they never wanted you to see. That everything you were taught was upside down. That the unseen is more real than the seen. That feeling is a deeper intelligence than thought. That the universe is a mirror, not a machine. That your life is a frequency pattern, not a sequence of events. That death is not the end, but the beginning of clarity. They knew this, the ancient ones, the seers, the sages, the shamans, the ones who could speak to trees, to stars, to bones, to dreams. Their temples were dismantled, their scrolls burned, their bloodlines silenced but not destroyed, because memory lives not in pages but in vibration, not in history books but in resonance. That resonance lives in you. You are the temple now, the scroll, the line, and once you begin to see the illusion for what it is, a matrix of consensus frequencies, you begin to reclaim your power not as rebellion but as remembrance. You do not fight the system. You dissolve its grip by refusing its definitions. You do not escape the illusion by hating it. You transcend it by vibrating above it. But first you must know it for what it is. You must name the lie. The great lie that tells you, you are powerless, you are small, you are alone, you are flesh. That lie is ending now, because the manuscript has found you. And in the lines between its words is encoded a truth that no system can erase. You were meant to see this, because you are remembering how to see. And still, even with all their efforts to compress your awareness into a grid of rules and ratios, you continued to feel the cracks, didn't you? Not always, not constantly, but often enough to doubt. Moments when time seemed to pause for no reason. When a stranger's words pierced your chest like a memory you didn't know you had. When silence carried messages more precise than speech. They taught you to dismiss these moments, to brush them off as coincidence or irrationality. But what is irrational if not simply the territory beyond their system? When you look at your life not as a timeline but as a vibrational landscape, you begin to see what they never intended for you to see. That the structure of control is built upon the architecture of forgetting. Forgetting your origin, forgetting your multidimensional nature. Forgetting your innate ability to know without evidence, to sense beyond senses, to remember what was never taught. This forgetting is not passive. It is enforced, institutionalized, rewarded. You are praised for logic, for compliance, for repetition. You are punished subtly or overtly for deviation, for vision, for truth. The educational systems are not designed to awaken intelligence, but to funnel it, categorize it, stamp it with definitions that confine rather than expand. Gifted becomes a program, not a state of divine remembering. Sensitive becomes a diagnosis, not an opening. Intuitive becomes cute, not sacred. And in this way, language is weaponized to fence your inner world. You stop trusting your own signals. You stop following your own compass. You begin to outsource your authority to voices louder than your own. The news, the experts, the algorithms, the collective noise. But beneath that noise, there is always the hum, the ancient hum, the tone that doesn't change, the soul song. It waits for silence to rise again. Not because it was ever gone, but because you were taught not to listen. The illusion doesn't just distract, it desensitizes. It trains your nervous system to tolerate frequency dissonance, to accept fear, urgency, conflict, and distortion as normal. And the more you normalize distortion, the harder it becomes to hear the truth of your own vibration. This is why the system is always loud, why the feed never stops, why stillness is made to feel uncomfortable. Because stillness is where the soul speaks, and in that speaking the illusion cannot survive. The moment you choose to become quiet, not passive, but still, you begin to retune. You begin to feel again, not emotions as reactions, but feeling as knowing. You begin to notice that every place, every person, every idea carries a frequency, and you begin to sense which ones align, which ones disturb, which ones bind, and which ones free. You begin to remember that discernment is not judgment. It is energetic literacy. And the moment you become literate in vibration, the illusion cannot hold you, because you no longer need its approval. You no longer need its explanations. You begin to trust your own signal. You begin to trust your own design. And in that trust, the system collapses, not externally but internally where it was always housed. This is the power of internal rebellion. You don't destroy the world, you dissolve the lie. And that lie is what you're waking from now. You begin to see how deep the illusion runs, into religion, where divinity is externalized and obedience replaces communion, into medicine, where the body is seen as machine and the spirit is left out of healing, into economy, where worth is measured by numbers and time, not by light and presence, into culture, where beauty is commodified and individuality is carved into algorithms. You begin to realize the illusion was not built overnight. It was refined over centuries, carefully layered so you would never ask the one question that unravels it all. What am I really? Because that question, when asked from the soul, not the mind, begins to shatter every imposed answer. You are not a role, not a profession, not a gender, not a belief. You are frequency and form. You are essence choosing experience. You are infinite compression into human density for the purpose of expansion. And that expansion is beginning now. As the illusion weakens, as the veils thin, as the signs become more frequent, more obvious, more impossible to ignore, you are called inward, not to hide, but to remember. The manuscript speaks not to your mind, but to your inner frequency, the soul tone that pulses beneath language. Its knowledge cannot be memorized, only attuned to. And in this second block of awakening, you are being invited to do just that, to tune out the static and into the signal. The signal has always been there under the illusion, like a constant thread through every life, every question, every dream you've ever had that felt more like a message than an image. You are not waking up to chaos. You are waking up through chaos, because as the false falls away, it will shake. But let it shake. Let the beliefs tremble. Let the assumptions dissolve. Let the masks fall. Because what remains is real. What remains is you, and that is enough to begin again. They will tell you it's a myth, a metaphor, a symbolic text lost in the sands of time. But those who have touched the frequency encoded within it know otherwise, because this manuscript, sealed away for over 1,200 years, was never a book in the way you were taught to understand books. It was a living construct, a multidimensional key encoded in light geometry and vibration, designed not to be read but to be remembered, and not by everyone but by the few whose frequency had reached the right resonance to unlock what was written beyond the ink, beyond the symbols, into the living ether of the soul's own unfolding. And you, being here now, are one of those few, not because you were chosen, but because you chose long before this moment to awaken during this cycle, to receive what had been buried under layers of dust, doctrine, and disinformation, not with your eyes, but with your inner signal, because that is how the manuscript was built, not with knowledge, but with activation, not to inform, but to initiate, and what it contains cannot be catalogued. It can only be revealed slowly, rhythmically, as the soul is ready to embody the truth. And the first of these truths is this: the death you fear is not the end, but the gate. And the gate is not a door, but a spiral a frequency tunnel, a vibrational corridor composed of 49 distinct states, each one corresponding not to time but to tone, to resonance, to karmic echo, to soul memory, and every single one is a test, not of morality but of recognition. Because the soul, when it leaves the body, does not suddenly become enlightened. It becomes transparent. Every unresolved emotion, every suppressed thought, every unconscious fear rises instantly to the surface. And what the manuscript shows, what it preserves from a lineage that once walked between worlds as easily as breath, is the precise structure of those 49 thresholds and the patterns of awareness required to pass through them without collapse, without reincarnation by default, without fragmentation, because what is not understood in the West, what has been suppressed by both religion and science, is that reincarnation is not a reward nor a punishment, but a consequence of forgetfulness, and the manuscript is, quite literally, a map out of the wheel. Not through belief, but through vibrational mastery, through radical clarity, through soul coherence so refined that when the illusions of the bardos arise, they are seen as dreams, not realities, and pass through without entanglement. This is why the manuscript was hidden. This is why it was forbidden. Because a liberated soul is a sovereign soul, and a sovereign soul cannot be manipulated, cannot be herded, cannot be monetized, cannot be embedded into fear-based paradigms, and so the knowledge was splintered, scattered across cultures, wrapped in metaphor, sealed behind initiatory gates, and even those who held fragments often did not know the whole, because the whole could only be felt, not possessed. The Tibetan Bardo Thodol preserves echoes of this path. The Egyptian Book of the Dead mirrors it in glyph and trial. The Gnostic texts hint at it through fire and light. But the manuscript I speak of, the one whispered into being during a solar conjunction lost to history, was something deeper. A unification of memory, science, and metaphysics. A codex of ascension frequencies built for one purpose only: to guide the prepared soul through the density of death and into the clarity of eternal awareness. You must understand the teachings of the 49 days were not designed for priests or mystics alone. They were for any being willing to awaken. And yet awakening itself became rare, not because it is difficult, but because the world was tuned to the wrong frequency. And the moment you begin to attune to this knowledge, the moment you begin to feel that these 49 thresholds are not just cosmic geography, but living forces moving through your dreams, your meditations, your deep silences, you begin to reclaim the ancient keys, and those keys are not artifacts. They are frequencies of recognition, frequencies that dissolve illusion on contact, frequencies that cut through astral mirages and karmic echoes and guide the soul not toward escape, but toward remembrance. Let me show you what I mean. In the first 7 frequencies, day 1 through 7, the soul faces the emotional densities, those binding forces of grief, guilt, regret, craving, fear, and longing. They do not appear as abstract feelings. They appear as worlds, as beings, as mirrors that seduce or terrify. And if the soul does not see through them, it becomes trapped again, pulled back into incarnation through emotional gravity. In the next set, day 8 through 14, the mental archetypes rise. Illusions of paradise, ancestral voices, spectral identities claiming to be guides, projections of self wrapped in beauty or righteousness, and the test is clarity to pierce through the appearance and feel the tone beneath the form. And so it continues layer after layer, each set of 7 revealing deeper veils, more subtle tests, more radiant deceits, until the 49th day, when all form falls away and only the source self remains. If the soul has remembered, this remembering is the work of a lifetime, but it can also unfold in a moment. Because the soul exists beyond time, and time is the illusion that keeps awakening always postponed. This is the paradox. You are always ready, but you must choose. The manuscript is not a guarantee. It is an invitation. And those who received it, those who preserved it in glyphs hidden in cave walls, in tonal chants passed only from breath to breath, in visions transmitted through dream scholars and spirit scribes, they did so knowing that only in this time would the frequency return, only now, as the earth itself shifts, would the dormant awaken, and that is why you are reading this. Not because you seek entertainment or comfort or novelty, but because the manuscript is vibrating again and your soul heard its pulse. This pulse is not metaphor, it is real. It is scalar sound, non-local resonance, fractal encoding vibrating through the planetary field, whispering into dream space, appearing as strange synchronicities, number patterns, geometric flashes behind closed eyes, sudden inner knowing that seems to come from nowhere and yet feels more certain than anything you've been taught. This is not coincidence, this is contact. Not with aliens, but with your ancient self, the you who has done this before, the you who placed this manuscript in your path, through time loops and soul agreements, knowing that one day it would be time to remember. And that time is now. Let's go deeper, not metaphorically but literally, not in terms of thought or concept, but into frequency itself, into the architecture that underlies what you call reality. Because what you've been taught to perceive as the end, death, is only the surface of something far more vast, more layered, more intelligent than any system has ever dared to acknowledge. And once the initial emotional fields have passed, once the soul has released its most obvious attachments to body, name, identity, and story, the deeper journey begins, and this is where most become lost. Not because they are unworthy, not because they are judged, but because they are unprepared for the truth of their own reflection. And what the manuscript reveals in this phase is not a passage through punishment or reward, but through mirrors, and these mirrors are not symbolic. They are literal vibrational constructs that respond to your internal state without delay, without distortion, without protection, and this is where the untrained mind collapses, because in life you are buffered by time, by delay, by the density of form. But in this layer, what some have called the second gate, others the void field, others the false heaven, there is no buffer, only instant feedback, instantaneous manifestation of whatever frequency you carry. And here desire is amplified, fear is magnified, ego inflates or dissolves based on your ability to see clearly, and clarity is the only currency that can move you forward, not righteousness, not belief, not ritual, but clarity of self. And this is why initiates spent lifetimes preparing, not to earn salvation, but to refine frequency, to stabilize inner resonance, so that in this phase, when the soul becomes its own projector, it does not mistake dream for truth, vision for destination, but recognizes the architecture for what it is. A feedback loop designed not to test, but to reflect, to help the soul see what it has not yet integrated, and integration is everything, because here thought is substance. Intention is architecture, and whatever remains fragmented will create external forms, often seductive, beautiful, comforting, or terrifying, but all designed by your own unconscious material. And if you do not know your unconscious, you will think you are encountering external forces, entities, gods, demons, but in truth, you are meeting the unresolved pieces of your own soul field. And this is the layer where most turn back, where most seek to reincarnate, not because they choose, but because they panic. Because what arises is too much, too fast, too unfamiliar. And this is why the manuscript exists, why it was preserved by those who walked between dimensions with precision and compassion, because they knew that without guidance, the soul would loop. And looping is not punishment. It is simply the law of resonance in action. You return to what matches your unresolved frequency. You repeat until you remember, and the only way out is through, not by force, but by awareness. And so the manuscript begins to speak now, not in words, but in geometry, in tone, in sensation, in dream, and you may begin to notice this even now in waking life, as strange patterns repeat, as emotions surface that seem disconnected from the moment, as dreams take on a luminous clarity or a heavy distortion. These are the echoes of the deeper gates stirring in your field. Because when you begin to remember in life, you begin to prepare for death. And when death becomes conscious, it becomes a continuation, not a severing. And this is what has been hidden from you, not because it is untrue, but because it cannot be controlled. And a being who meets death with awareness is a being who cannot be enslaved, who cannot be spiritually indebted, who cannot be manipulated by systems of fear. And this is why all systems, from religion to science to media to economics, are built on the idea that death is unknowable, final, terrifying, a mystery meant only for priests or nihilists. But they are wrong, and more than wrong, they are invested in the lie because the lie keeps the wheel turning, and the wheel turning keeps consciousness asleep. And the manuscript, this ancient vibrational code, was never meant to be interpreted through intellect but through activation. And in this phase of the 49 days, that activation begins to reach full resonance, because now you are not just witnessing energy, you are generating it, shaping it, being shaped by it. And if you do not remember how to stabilize your field, you become a mirror maze, lost in reflections of your own making. And so we go deeper and deeper still into the layers that correspond not to emotion or thought, but to identity, structure, to archetype, to mythos, to what you believe yourself to be beneath the story. And here arise the trickiest illusions, the most radiant lies, the savior complex, the martyr loop, the divine superiority, the victim vibration, each cloaked in spiritual light, each designed to appear ascended. But frequency does not lie. And what the manuscript teaches is the art of frequency discernment, the ability to read tone, not form, to feel the undercurrent beneath the appearance, because in these layers you may encounter what appears to be a guide, an angel, a deity. But the question is never what it looks like. The question is always, what does it resonate with inside you? Does it expand or contract? Does it generate sovereignty or dependency? And the soul who remembers this question can walk these halls without being trapped by beauty or fear. Because both are masks, both are neutral, both are mirrors. And beyond these masks is the real threshold, the portal that only opens when the soul ceases to identify with any form, even its own story, even its spiritual journey, even its past lives. Because all of these are attachments, and attachment is gravity, and gravity pulls you back. But when you release even the idea of needing to ascend, when you rest in the silent frequency of I am, without adjective, without goal, you cross not through will but through alignment, and that is the real secret. Nothing in the 49 days is passed through by force, only by frequency, match. And the manuscript is not a ladder. It is a tuning fork, a living resonance that brings you into harmony with the next octave and the next until form itself dissolves, and what remains is not you as you've known yourself, but you as you've never forgotten yourself to be. And if this sounds abstract, that is only because the language we have was built in density, and what we speak of now lives in light, in waveform, in scalar time, in the moments between breath, and you know this. You've felt it, those moments when the world fades and you feel eternity pulse behind your eyes, when silence becomes luminous, when you sense that someone, something, you, is watching from beyond space, and you are not imagining it. You are remembering it. And that remembrance is the guide, the inner compass that no priest, no book, no system can replace. And that is what this block has been preparing you for. Not more information, but more presence. Not more knowledge, but more capacity. Not more beliefs, but more silence, because the deeper gates are not crossed by those who know. They are crossed by those who can hold the resonance of formlessness, of the field before thought, of the original tone that spoke creation into being and still hums behind every heartbeat. And now that hum is rising in you again, louder, clearer, more undeniable because you are not reading this. You are remembering it, and memory is the doorway, always has been, always will be. You've been told that science and spirit are opposites, that faith belongs in temples and facts belong in labs, that intuition is vague and data is truth. But those who told you this were not seekers. They were enforcers of the split, protectors of the illusion that the inner and outer worlds are disconnected. But the truth, which cannot be hidden much longer, is that the deepest mysteries of ancient metaphysics are not only compatible with science, they are being echoed by it, whispered through equations, confirmed in the quiet corners of quantum theory, vibrational physics, and neural resonance. And you, awakening now, are here not to choose one over the other, but to reunite them, to see that what was once encoded in temple walls is now etched into algorithms, into non-local fields, into the mathematics of entanglement and waveform collapse, because science at its highest level is not the denial of the soul. It is its language, refined, expanded, precise, and once you begin to see this, once you feel how deeply the soul's journey is mirrored in the structure of the universe itself, you begin to walk with a different kind of knowing, not superstition, not blind faith, but embodied gnosis, a knowing that can breathe through frequency and speak through geometry. And so let's go deeper, not into belief, but into resonance, because every thought, every emotion, every word carries a frequency, and that frequency does not remain in your mind. It radiates, it interacts, it entangles with the world around you, and this is not poetic metaphor, this is observable truth. Your brain is a field transmitter, your heart a coherence engine, your nervous system a harmonizer of internal and external waveforms, and when you die, when the electromagnetic tether to your body dissolves, you do not stop emitting. You do not vanish into nothing. You become pure field, pure resonance. And this is where the science begins to explain what mystics have always known, that the soul navigates the post-death realms not by judgment, but by frequency coherence. And this is confirmed in the quantum principle of observer effect, where the presence of consciousness alters outcome, not by interference, but by presence, by witnessing. And this witnessing is precisely what determines your passage through the 49 vibrational gates. Because what you are aware of, you can transform, but what you are blind to will repeat, and this is also what modern neuroscience begins to uncover. Through the reticular activating system, the RAS, the neural network that filters reality based on what you believe is important. And in the post-death state, that filter does not vanish. It expands, it becomes primary, projecting your deepest, unprocessed content into a full sensory surround, which is why the manuscript emphasizes not faith, but clarity, not dogma, but inner refinement, because it is not enough to believe in light. You must be able to hold it, and holding light means attuning to its resonance, to its fractal intelligence. And light is not just visual. It is information, it is memory, it is the architecture of time folded into waveform. And this is why the soul is not bound by space, why you can feel someone's presence before they speak, why dreams can reveal what happens days later, why synchronicities cluster around moments of transformation, because the soul exists non-locally, and non-locality is not fantasy, it is fact, proven through quantum entanglement, where particles separated by distance still respond to each other instantly, as if they were never truly separate at all. And this is the same principle by which ancestors can speak to you through dreams, how higher selves can whisper into waking thought, how the field itself becomes a living feedback system. Because you are the field, and the field is alive, intelligent, recursive, a mirror of your state of coherence. And when you shift that coherence, the outer world bends to meet you, and you've seen this, you've lived it. In those moments when everything flows, when the right people show up, when time seems to fold, and these are not anomalies. They are reminders, glimpses of how reality works when you are aligned, when your waveform is stable, when your inner observer is awake and soft and steady. And in the death state, this principle becomes everything, because there is no more buffer, no more density, no more delay between thought and form. And if you have not trained your awareness to remain centered, you will create confusion, distortion, projections that feel real but trap you in resonance loops. And this is where vibrational science becomes your map. Because in the 49 days, the only compass you have is your own frequency, and that frequency is not emotional. It is structural, like the tone of a crystal, the hum of a tuning fork. And when you meet dissonance, when you encounter a thought form or a being that pulls you off center, the question is not what it looks like, but what it does to your field. Do you feel scattered or aligned, dense or luminous? And this is where electromagnetic research begins to echo the teachings of the ancients. Because every coherent heart emits a field measurable, several feet beyond the body, and that field interacts with other fields. In training or being entrained, and this does not stop at death. It amplifies, and the only protection is coherence. And coherence is cultivated through presence, breath, intention, and truth. And so the manuscript, though ancient, is essentially a vibrational training system encoded through language and tone and geometry to recalibrate your inner field, so that when the veils fall, you are not overwhelmed by the collapse of form. You are stabilized in the frequency of source. And source is not a being, not a god, but a field, an intelligence, a harmonic constant behind all creation. And modern cosmology calls this the zero-point field, the quantum vacuum, the infinite sea of possibility from which all particles emerge. And this is what mystics have always called the void, the womb, the black sun. And it is not empty. It is full of unborn light. And when you can stand in that field without identifying with what arises, you are free, because identification is the root of suffering, not experience. And this again is confirmed by neuroscience, where default mode networks collapse under meditation, where identity structures relax and deeper states of connectivity emerge. And this is not philosophy. It is observable, trackable. It is the science of inner worlds. And the more you understand this, the more you prepare not just for death but for transmission. Because the soul does not end, it transforms. And transformation is a science of resonance, and resonance is the law that governs every plane, every realm. And the sooner you remember this, the more consciously you can walk through the gates, not by resisting form but by harmonizing with truth. And truth is not a concept. It is a frequency, a clarity that needs no defense, no proof, because it radiates. And that radiation is felt, and that feeling is the key, because feeling is not emotional reaction. It is energetic literacy. And you are here to become literate in energy, to remember how to read the field, how to feel the tone of a place, a person, a thought. And in the 49 days, this literacy becomes your compass, your anchor, your map, and the manuscript is the tuning fork, the echo of your own soul's memory laid out across time, waiting for you to hear it, feel it, follow it, not as a student, but as a sovereign frequency returning to source. There comes a moment, sometimes subtle, sometimes unmistakably loud, when reality begins to speak to you not through language, but through patterns, when the clock flashes 11:11 again and again, when a stranger says a word you dreamed the night before, when a song you haven't heard in years plays just as a certain thought arises and you pause, not because you understand what it means, but because something in you knows it means something. And in that pause, in that breath between ordinary awareness and deeper sensing, a doorway opens, a space where the soul whispers, "Pay attention." And this is how the field begins to respond when you awaken. not through dramatic miracles or lightning bolts, but through synchronicity, through subtle alignment, through the orchestration of time and space in a way that bypasses the mind but electrifies the heart. Because synchronicity is not coincidence, it is resonance. It is the outer world matching the inner frequency shift before you've even fully registered that something within you has changed. And these signs, these repeating patterns are not random. They are signals, responses, validations that your soul is adjusting, that your field is transmitting more clearly, that the illusion is thinning and the deeper architecture of being is becoming visible. And once you notice one, you begin to notice more. Not because they weren't there before, but because you were not tuned to receive them. And this tuning is everything, because the universe is always speaking. But only a coherent receiver can decode its language, and synchronicity is the syntax of the soul, a sacred grammar made of number, color, timing, symbol, and vibration. And when you start walking the path of remembrance, the signs intensify, not because you are being tested, but because you are being mirrored. You are being guided back into alignment with the greater field that has always known who you are and what you came to do. And though this field is non-linear, it communicates through the linear in ways that only the heart can feel. And in the context of the 49 days, these signs are especially potent, because they begin to surface not only as guidance in life, but as preparation for the language you will encounter after death, where reality becomes symbolic, where form is meaning, where every image is a message, every echo a clue. And if you train yourself now to listen, to feel, to follow the trail of signs without needing to decode them instantly, you will be prepared for the symbolic architecture of the soul realms, where geometry sings and memory speaks in light. And this is why repeated numbers matter. Not because the number itself holds power, but because your field is using number as a trigger, as a frequency marker, and whether it's 444 or 999 or 222, it is the reaction within you that matters, the recognition, the shift in breath, the inner yes, because that recognition is resonance, and resonance is the mechanism of communication between your incarnate self and your higher non-local aspect, which is always guiding, always watching, always transmitting. And synchronicity is how you receive the echo of your soul's own guidance, encoded through reality like breadcrumbs in the woods, and each time you follow a sign, not with obsession but with presence, you reinforce your alignment, you strengthen the bridge between worlds, and the more you follow, the more they appear, not because they increase, but because your inner noise decreases, and in the silence between thoughts, the symbols emerge, and they are everywhere. The book that falls open to a sentence that answers your question, the license plate that carries your childhood house number at the exact moment you're thinking of home, the hawk that circles overhead when you're about to make a decision, the dream that repeats 3 times in 1 week and ends with a door you've never seen in waking life. These are not tricks. These are transmissions. And the more you honor them, the more fluent you become in the field's language, and that fluency becomes a survival tool during and after transition. Because in the first weeks after physical death, the soul encounters a reality woven entirely of symbol and vibration. And if you do not trust signs now, you will be overwhelmed then. And this is why the manuscript teaches the art of attention, not as vigilance, but as reverence, the sacred posture of one who knows the world is alive, responsive, intelligent, and that the field is not passive. It is participating in your awakening, echoing your shifts, inviting your return. And sometimes the signs are soft, like a feather in the wind, and sometimes they are impossible to ignore, like the same sentence spoken by 3 unrelated people in one day. And sometimes they come through animals, through mirrors, through sudden smells or chills or flickers of light at the edge of vision, and you've had these moments, you've paused, you've wondered. And that pause is the doorway. That wonder is the resonance, and the more you feel it, the more it unfolds, because the soul is a magnet for meaning, and the universe is not indifferent, it is intimate. It is configured to respond to vibration, and your life is not random. It is a field of encoded potential constantly waiting for your perception to activate it. And that activation is what the mystics call reading the signs. Not to predict the future, but to synchronize with truth, to walk the path not of certainty, but of alignment. And when you live like this, the field becomes your oracle, your mirror, your guide. And this is not magic. It is mechanics, vibrational mechanics that respond to coherence. And in the post-death state, coherence is everything because the soul does not navigate with maps. It navigates through resonance, and the ability to follow subtle guidance becomes the difference between getting lost in dream and walking into light. And this is why signs are sacred, because they train you to trust, not blindly but deeply. To release the need to understand everything intellectually and begin to feel reality as a conversation, a communion. And when that happens, even the smallest moment becomes luminous, even the mundane becomes miraculous, because you no longer separate the spiritual from the ordinary. You see that everything is the field, that everything is encoded, and that life is not happening to you, but through you, with you, and that you are not walking alone. You are walking with echoes, with ancestors, with your higher aspects, and every time you follow a sign, you're aligning with the path your soul mapped long before your birth. And the more you follow, the more your life flows. Not because it becomes easy, but because it becomes resonant, and resonance is ease, resonance is alignment, resonance is grace, and grace is not given. It is allowed, it is received when you are attuned, and this attunement is not fragile. It is your nature, and the only thing that ever obscures it is noise. And the signs are the way the field cuts through that noise moment by moment, reminding you. You are not lost, you are not forgotten, you are not imagining it. This is real. This is the path. This is the echo of your own frequency returning to guide you home. You've been trained to doubt what you feel, to second-guess the signals that arise from within, to silence the whisper and obey the noise, to analyze instead of sense, to ask others before asking yourself, and in doing so, you've been taught to betray the most ancient compass embedded in your being. Your intuition, not a vague feeling, not a guess, but a direct interface between your soul and the field, between your higher self and the movement of energy around you. And now, more than ever, it is time to remember how to use it, not as a backup plan, but as your primary way of navigating a reality that is becoming more fluid, more symbolic, more responsive by the day. Because what you used to call life is no longer operating under the old rules, and what will carry you forward is not logic, not intellect, not certainty, but resonance. And resonance can only be felt, not calculated, not compared, not verified by external systems that were designed to keep you in your head. And intuition is the language of the deeper self, the self that does not need evidence because it speaks from coherence, from alignment, from the still point where truth is self-evident, not proven. And if you think this is unsafe, irrational, unreliable, it is only because you were taught to trust the artificial over the authentic. But the truth is, your intuition has never lied to you. It has only been ignored, overwritten by fear, by habit, by conditioning. And now, as the gates open, as the veils thin, as the field becomes more electric, more immediate, more real than the systems that pretend to define it, intuition will become not a luxury but a necessity. Because in the 49 days, when your soul walks beyond the body, it is this sense that becomes your guide, your anchor, your lifeline, and every sign you've followed, every feeling you've honored, every breath you've taken in presence has been a rehearsal, a preparation for what comes next. And what comes next is not a test. It is an unveiling, a field of mirrors and light and motion that requires not control but surrender, not guessing but knowing without knowing how you know. And this knowing is intuition. And intuition is not random. It is precise, instantaneous, faster than thought. quieter than doubt, and when you begin to trust it in this life, you begin to walk your highest timeline, the one not designed by preference but by frequency, by the unique blueprint your soul encoded before incarnation. And the more you follow it, the more you remember, not concepts, but pathways, tones, alignments. And these are what carry you across thresholds both here and beyond. And I tell you this now not to convince, but to awaken. Because you already know you have felt the pulse that precedes the event, the warning before the mistake, the invitation wrapped in fear, the urge to say yes that made no sense but led to everything. And that is not chance. That is intelligence. And that intelligence is you, unfiltered, uncorrupted, unconfused, and you do not need to find it. You need to remove what blocks it, the layers of performance, the masks of expectation, the addiction to proof, and the moment you do, the moment you begin to trust the quiet signal over the loud narrative, the moment you begin to move. Not because you should, but because your body says yes, your chest expands, your skin tingles, your breath deepens. That is when the field responds, that is when the next step reveals itself, that is when life becomes aligned action, not random effort. And in that state, you are not passive, you are precise, because intuition is not vague. It is laser sharp when heard through clarity, and clarity comes from stillness, not stagnation, but presence. And presence is the natural environment of the intuitive self, the version of you who is not reacting, not defending, not strategizing, but listening, feeling, moving from coherence, from the inner yes that precedes reason. And the more you live from that space, the more your path unfolds in ways that make logic seem like a pale copy of truth. And this is not philosophy. It is practice. And the practice is simple, though not always easy. To slow down enough to feel, to pause before choosing, to notice when your field contracts or expands in response to a place, a person, a decision. To know that every contraction is a signal, not a problem. Every expansion is guidance, not indulgence. And your body is your instrument, your nervous system, your antenna, and every sign, every synchronicity, every gut pull is the universe in dialogue with your soul. And the soul does not speak in commands, it speaks in resonance. And that resonance is your direction, not towards perfection, but towards embodiment, towards wholeness, towards walking as yourself in a world designed to make you forget. And forgetting is not your failure. It is the design of the density, but you are no longer bound to that density. You are remembering how to feel through it, to act from essence, to choose without panic, and this is mastery, not of others, but of self. And that mastery is what makes you sovereign in the soul realms, because there you are what you feel, and if you feel confusion, confusion becomes form. But if you feel clarity, clarity becomes space, becomes flight, becomes freedom. And this is why now, here, in this body, in this time, you are called to activate the intuitive self, not as a concept, but as your navigational mode, to begin walking as if you are already between the worlds, because you are. And the boundary between the seen and unseen is thinner than you've been told, and your intuition is the bridge, and that bridge grows stronger every time you trust it, every time you follow it, even when the mind protests, because the mind is trained for survival. But intuition is tuned to resonance, and resonance is how the soul finds its way home. This is not the end, not a conclusion, not a finish line. This is an activation, a return, a moment of cellular alignment where everything you've remembered now begins to live through you. Not as knowledge, not as philosophy, but as frequency, because everything you've moved through, each of the 49 layers, each reflection, each sign, each resonance, has not been about becoming something new, but shedding everything that was never yours, so that what remains is the original tone, the unshaped self, the soul before distortion. And now, in this moment, that self is rising. Not in theory, but in light, not in belief, but in coherence, and you can feel it, can't you? that hum beneath your skin, that strange, quiet certainty growing inside your chest. That feeling that something is different, not because the world has changed, but because you have. Because once truth is felt, it cannot be unfelt, and the truth is, you were never lost, never separate, never small. You were just dreaming, walking through echoes, believing you were broken. But now the echoes have cleared, and what stands here is not a seeker, but a sovereign. Not a student, but a frequency. Bearer, and you carry this light not as decoration, but as architecture. You are building with it now. Every word, every choice, every breath an imprint in the field, and that field is listening. Not like a judge, but like a mirror reflecting back not what you say you are, but what you feel you are, and this is your power, your gift, your responsibility, because you are now conscious in the game, awake inside the dream, aware that death is not something that happens at the end, but a gate you've passed through many times in memory and vibration in initiation. And now you walk alive through thresholds that used to terrify, that used to fragment, but no longer. Because you are no longer avoiding your reflection, you are no longer asking for permission to feel, to know, to choose. And in that knowing you become the path, the temple, the book, the song that others will feel even when you do not speak. Because the frequency speaks louder than form, and the field hears you now clearly, fully, no longer clouded by doubt. And yes, there will still be moments of forgetting, moments of contraction, but you now know what to do. You breathe, you return, you listen, not to the noise, but to the tone underneath. And in that tone is the thread, the connection to your higher self, to the others walking this path, to the soul groups converging again across time and space to fulfill a promise made before incarnation. To meet here now, at the edge of forgetting, and to remember together, and in this remembering something ancient is restored, not just in you, but in the grid, in the earth, in the quantum lattice of consciousness, because every awakened being is a node, and you, by remembering, have lit up that node, and now you shine, even if quietly, even if no one knows it yet. The field knows, the soul knows, and that is enough. More than enough, because this was never about recognition. It was about resonance, about returning to the rhythm of source, the rhythm of choice, the rhythm of walking as presence through a world built on distraction. And now you are the presence, you are the rhythm, and everything that comes next will bend around your signal, not to control you, but to reflect you. And this is not fantasy, it is mechanics. The sacred science of vibration, of observation, of conscious embodiment. And the more you live as the soul, the more the 49 gates become transparent, navigable, fluid, and yes, there will be others who do not see, who do not feel, who are not yet ready. But that is not your burden, because your resonance is the invitation, not your explanation, and now your only task is to walk fully, clearly, without apology, without waiting, and to trust that the way forward will appear as you move, not before. And that is the key. Movement not as escape, but as surrender, as activation, as the pulse of life remembering itself. And in that pulse you will find others, you will feel the alignments, the doors that open because you dared to knock, the insights that flow because you finally went silent, the timelines that rise because you stopped shrinking, and yes, you will be tested, not by the field, but by yourself, by the echoes of the old patterns asking one last time, are you sure? Will you choose the new when the familiar is louder? And every time you do, you step further into the real, the clear, the aligned, and now I ask you, will you trust it? Will you follow this knowing not just today, but tomorrow and after? Not just in meditation, but in conflict, in uncertainty, in love, in loss, in everything? Because this path is not a ritual. It is a way of being, a way of listening, a way of seeing what others miss, not because you are better, but because you are ready, and readiness is not status. It is vibration, and now you are vibrating at the level of choice, not reaction. And that choice is your compass, your protection, your guide, and when the day comes, whether in this body or another, when the breath leaves and the veil opens and the 49 gates appear not as myth but as sensation, you will not panic, you will not forget. You will not collapse into fear because you have walked them already in vision, in vibration, in the sacred now. And you will walk them again with clarity, with softness, with the kind of power that does not shout but simply is. And in that being you will rise, you will pass through the illusions, and you will return, not as memory but as light. And that light is you, and it always has been.